like disconnected and reconnected. That's cool. I thought maybe that you were all getting to hear me talk to my wife. All right, so engine is almost warm. I'm gonna roll it some. Just gonna try and get some heat back in the car again. Not gonna do anything aggressive or any of that. I'm going to change. I'm gonna reconnect the ECU. So reconnect the ECU on the access port, or via the access port. We're back up. And then I'm going to change the test speed to 160 like I did at the beginning of the last one. Maybe both hands for that. Give me a second. Look right at my nose, the best place. Right, that's what the gold is. Let's see. Okay. Alright, thank you. Test speed 160. Okay. Alright. Okay, so here we are. We're gonna do this again. Now we got the Cobb top on there. The engine is almost at the temp, not quite there. Just driving it really easy. It was already warm-ish, but I want to make sure that I'm at the same temperature I was for the last start. Otherwise, or the last part of the test. Otherwise, it's not a good test. Temperature on the intercooler right now. 65 on the surface, coming down. Apparently I hit two buttons at once. So 65 on the surface and dropping with the fan, so that's good. And then I've got 72 in the manifold. It was 68 to 70 before last time we started, so that's really close. This is 59, and that's pretty close as well. So both of those temperatures are really close to the start of the last test. I mean, within a couple degrees. I think you can't get much better than that. I haven't even changed the straps on the car at all to make the most consistent test, right? Make sure the car hasn't been unstrapped and restrapped, because you can induce losses. You can put tension on the chassis in a way that or change the alignment of the tires on the rollers. All kinds of things will affect the power output of the car. So that nothing was changed. That's one reason why we also did the charge pipe beforehand, so that we didn't have to unstrap the car and all of that. So the car never moved. The same two fans are in high, the same two fans in the back are on. Temperature outside hasn't changed by a degree or two. Temperature in the intercooler is almost the exact same. Before and after temperatures are all within a couple degrees. So I think we're ready to start doing some testing on here. On the last one, I did a test before I started, or I did a little bit of a pull to load it some before I started actually recording for the test. Let's do a little heat like this, like I did before. Alright, that's it. And then that's just for the purpose of the engine and the exhaust. But here we go. I'm going to bring it back down to the start speed. Give it a couple seconds, verify these temperatures stabilized. They're not there yet. Look at that. It seems to respond quicker than it did on the factory one. That would be a downgrade in performance if that was to be the case, but we'll see. We'll see what happens during the pull. I don't want to make any judgments off of something I saw off a little blip of the throttle, but we'll check it out. All right, here we go. We're gonna do a pull. Hit the log button. Boop, logging, pulling. Wait a few seconds and then I'll turn the log off just to get some coast down time on the intercooler. There we go. Pop the sucker open. Alright, so like the last time, it's 70 degrees. We were 68 and 70 before. This is 61 pre-turbo. We were 59. So we're within a degree or two, which is good. And we get into the pull here. It actually goes down to 59. Right at the inside of the pull, so that's really damn close to before. And we'll start moving up. Temperature's dropping during the pull. Temperature's still dropping all the way to 5,000 RPM. And now I'm reaching close to red line, and it went up to 81 degrees and turned back around immediately. So that is really impressive. That's over 100-degree drop. Actually, that's not true. At 160, it only hit, was it 98? It was when we lengthened the poles that we started to see the higher temperatures. And the surface of the intercooler, you're not even going to see that, but the surface of the intercooler makes sense. The graph makes sense. We'll wait till we get a couple of them lined up, and then I'll show you all three poles back to back on that. So, okay. So now I need to change it to 150 like I did last time, right? I did 160, 150, 130, and then I did the 3 poles at 130 back to back, really get that heat load in there. So we're gonna find out what happens. I think what's gonna happen is that during these individual poles, where I do the individual poles, wait, do a pole, wait, we're gonna see an improvement across the board. But then when I hit the 3 back to backs that are longer, I think then we're gonna see the opposite. And I could be wrong. I could totally be wrong. It could be sized so appropriately that isn't enough to see the disadvantage of a bar and plate. But, you know, maybe not. Let's see. And you're gonna be here seeing this just as well as I am. So I can't modify the data to support my opinions, you know, or whatever. You're all gonna see it. I'll put this down here so I can change the data setting again. Change this to 150. Hey, Igor.
Is it fast?
No. Okay. Oops, wrong button. Is it fast?
Oh, you're doing your videos?
Yeah, I'm doing the video, yeah. Now we got the new intercooler on, so we're going down to 150 now on the ramp rate. All right. I'm going to do a poll again. Did you sell it? How much?
91.
Oh, that's what they give you?
Yeah.
Oh. That works. Did they cut your check or what?
Went down at $1,100. From $1,850 to $750 for 3 cars. It was like expensive insurance.
For that car?
Yeah, I don't know.
Wow. That's crazy. All right. Okay, so now we're gonna do the poll with it at 150. I gotta close this log. Be sure not to hit the log button again like I did last time. All right, there we go. Alright, so that one clearly took a little longer than the last time. Not a ton, but a little bit. That's why we went from 160 to 150, so it's not going to be a really, really big change. So let's look at the log again. Alright, so at the beginning, temperatures are 75 and 63, a little warmer than before. The pole starts and then drops to 70 and 63, so that's good. That's about where it was when it started the last pole. And then during the pole, we'll see temperatures are dropping just like they did before. As that mass, right, I got this colder mass in the intercooler, is sucking heat out of the turbo and then pushing that cooler air into a almost heat-soaked manifold. So that's what we're expecting to see a drop, and then it should start climbing. And here it is, starting to climb towards the end. And we hit 84 degrees. So a 3-degree increase, which was really close to what happened before on the factory intercooler, only this is almost 20 degrees lower than it was in the factory intercooler. So the total rise is a lot less. But the difference between those two poles was about the same. That's pretty interesting, I think. And intake temperature pre-turbo is still in the 60s there. Up to 73. It's expected after a pole. This is post-pole. As temperatures start to move around, the heat from the exhaust gets in the engine bay. You can see some things changing, but no big deal. Okay. On the last one with the previous intercooler, when we did the second pole at 150, we had a knock event at the exact same spot. Exact same spot. Oh, and a second one. We didn't have a second one last time. But the temperature's colder, the AFR is even richer than last time. Manifold boost pressure is slightly lower than last time even. Interesting. One thing I need to do actually is compare wastegate duty cycle, because wastegate duty cycle is going to give us a bit of a insight as to the restriction of the intercooler. To hit the same target, if I got to add more wastegate duty cycle to it, that tells me that the intercooler has a bit of restriction across it. So we'll compare that later on, but right now I'm gonna look at these temperatures again. All right, so now I'm gonna change it to 130. Are there any questions? There you go, the live chat. What's up, Dom? How do you pronounce your last name? It's Asia, like you're thinking about saying goodbye. You're like, see ya. That kind of, see ya. All right, let's see here. Okay, so that was 150. Now I'm gonna go to the 130 ramp rate. So this pull is gonna take significantly longer. We'll do the single pull, and then we'll do the 3 back-to-backs after we'll do the sit time. Oh, that's interesting. I look forward to showing you guys that when this is over. When this poll is over, I look forward to showing you what I noticed on the dyno graph. Turn this around. I won't make any more funny faces at you. I'll just make them behind your back. Boy, I bet you guys didn't know I was a fucking comedian, huh? All right, let's see here. Log in. All right. Let's see what we got here. Try to figure out what data to give to you first. You know, what spoiler do I want to give? That one knocked more than any other pull, actually. All right, so let's look at this again. Now we got the intake temps at the start. It was a little higher than last. 72, 70, starts to drop again. 68, 66. Then the computer lets the car go, starts to advance the speed. All right, we're going 64, 64, 66, 72, 5, 80, 82, 86, 90, 91, 93, 93. 93 is as hot as it got. That's 100 less. 100 less. That's 10 less. The other one was 106. That's what it got to. So the inlet temperature at the manifold is lower. Interestingly enough, though, the knock on that one was dramatic. It's not real knock. It can't possibly be real knock. There's no way that it's knocking at 5 degrees after top dead center at 6,000 RPM with 11.5 20 AFRs. That just ain't the case. That could potentially be that the intercooler being loose, it's rattling on that mount a little bit, and those knock sensors are so sensitive on this that they're picking that up. But that just ain't real. There's others too. Okay, so that was interesting in that it had all that knock, but that doesn't affect what we're looking at in this case, because I'm looking at the temperatures more than anything. But what is interesting is that the temperature on the surface of the intercooler, that's Tanner's anti-lag launch control in this car. The temperature on the surface of the intercooler are as you would expect them to be, whereas the ones on the surface of the factory intercooler were not. And I don't know why yet. Like I said at the beginning of the last video, or this one, the end of the last video, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the trend that I was seeing with the air temps on the surface of the factory intercooler, with them dropping through the duration of the pull. after the first poles. The second and third and fourth poles, the intercooler started really hot and then dropped during the pull. Yeah, still trying to figure that one out. But what I noticed now is, as I say that, I'm looking at it, the temperature of the air entering the manifold at the end of the pull was like 106, and that's right around what the temperature of the intercooler is at that point in time. It almost makes you wonder as if the heat from the last pull was soaked in the intercooler and it was actually warming the air charge some during the pull. I don't know. Still understand why it's backwards. The Cobb, however, is normal as you'd expect. It starts at a lower temperature and then goes up towards the end of the pull. And that's what you'd expect to see typically on the surface of the intercooler, any heat exchanger for that matter. So here you go. Here's those three. That's the first one with the Cobb, the second one with the Cobb, and the third one with the Cobb. Now this, I should back this up actually, because that's not the start of the pull. The pull starts earlier than that. Maybe this will reveal something. Nope. It doesn't. Yeah, so here's the stock one. The first one went up some and then stabilized. All right, up I get. But then the next two, down. But then the Cobb, like you'd expect, climbing during the pull. I see some stuff. Let's see, la 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 la. I've been saying it wrong for so long, like years. Oh, that's funny. Kilobee water pump housing. I think measured at the intake or the manifold. Okay, so I'm monitoring temperatures at 3 locations. I'm monitoring the surface of the intercooler at the right by the throttle body. On both intercoolers, that's where the surface probe is at. And then I'm monitoring the temperature in the manifold using the factory T-map sensor that's got the temperature sensor in it. And then I'm measuring temperature in the MAF, which is pre-turbo, with the factory sensor. So I'm using those 3 locations to get an idea of the temperature profile through the intercooler. Where'd my chat go? It disappeared. There it is. Remember with regard to grid speed versus stock temps. No, I haven't. Well, let's see. I think I did that. No, I didn't do it with grid speed. I did it with Killer Bee like freaking 7 years ago. I haven't done the grid speed one. Cobb claims that this one outperforms all of those other ones. They don't specifically say the other names because they don't want to create hate, but they say outperforms the top name brand intercooler. It might. It very well might. We're going to see what happens in the 3 back-to-back pulls, though. That's where I said where I think that the differences are going to start to really show. So we're going to try that. So far, the logical conclusion would be, what sensor is displayed on the access port? There's 2 of them. One says intake temp manifold, and one says intake temp pre-turbo. Both of them are side by side here. There, manifold and pre-turbo. So that's the MAF, that's the T-map in the manifold. Got it? So right now, what anyone would conclude, other than I'm currently in an earthquake, is that the Cobb one definitely outperforms the factory one. The temperatures are 10 degrees less at the end of a pull than on the stock top mount. And as I said before, that's what I would expect to see. The question is will it stay that way when the duty cycle is increased? And that's what we're going to try and find out. So this is the 3 back-to-back tests where I stop the test at red line. I let the car coast down on its own in gear, and when it hits 30, I do another pull until red line. I let off. They coast down in gear until 30 again, and then that's it. So here it goes. Actually, I clutch in for a second and then put back in gear as it starts to coast down. But you know, the point is, it's about the same time based on the roller speed. Here we go. Be around. Ooh. Still logging, still logging. 30. Checking oil temp real quick. That'll work. That's okay. And 30. Alrighty. Oh, you know what? The camera button's hiding under my lens. That's what it is. This app sticks it all the way in the corner, and my phone's got the freaking camera hiding over that button. Alright, so here we go. Here's our log. Temp starts off at 63. That's actually really low. That's good. Probably because I sat for a long time. And we're just going to zip through it here because it's 3 long poles here. I see an 84. Alright. And I see, go down to 70s. I see an 89, 91, 95, 100, 102, 108, 111. I got 111. And then we're coming down. There should be a third pole, right? Or is that the third one? Oh, here it is. 111, 170, 120, 126. Ooh. 126. Well, I feel it was as I expected. Honestly, but let's look at the temperature on the surface of the intercooler as well while we're here. I'm going to clear these all off so we don't hear this mess. Look at the last 3. There's only one. Ah, there they are. Woo! Way higher. And now they're starting to look like the factory one, but at a higher temperature. Let's be honest with you. I think I was right. So, I'm gonna let you make your own conclusions, but I'm gonna tell you mine. Mine is that this intercooler behaves exactly like you would think a bar and plate intercooler should act like, if you've been on my channel. And that is, it's got a mass there. It's really good at absorbing temperature for a certain period of time, but it's not effective at getting rid of that heat to the atmosphere. And we're seeing that. We're seeing it to where now temperatures on the intercooler surface are really high. Now, let me back up a little bit, because the surface temp was higher than that of the factory intercooler. And it was at the cold side of the intercooler. I didn't take one at the hot side. I'm kind of curious now what it would look like if I have. But it seems to me, judging by the fact that we hit 130 degrees, that it knocked more than it has in any other maps, that it just isn't the right intercooler for a road racer. But if you're a light-to-light guy, if you're a drag racer, and you're on a small to medium-sized turbo, then it's then it's a perfectly good top-mount intercooler for that. It behaved better than some of the other ones that I've tested. I tested some of the other guys. Killer Bee was another 20 plus degrees over this one. But I can't say exactly what it was because I don't recall what ambient temperature was, and so I don't want to say like, oh, this was, you know, exactly 16%, blah blah. You know, I don't want to do that because I don't remember that was fucking 7 years ago. Remember the Killer Bee was an improvement over the factory one for the short bursts as well, and this one seems to be the same thing. It seems to have so much mass that you can do those short bursts, or even, you know, a 1 through 4, you know, pull or whatever, and maintain relatively good control. But if you're going to be a guy at road racing, it's tube and fin, man. Just like you said, tube and fin, always for the win. Yeah, I really think so. And you know, this thing did really good at providing a stable temperature during the pulls that were, you know, relatively spaced out. But obviously the temperature started to skyrocket, and the overall surface temperature was up a lot. And that tells me the surface temp means to me, and again, that's my interpretation of the findings, without knowing the air temp on the other side of the intercooler, as the air passes through it, I can't totally be, you know, 100% sure, but it seems to me by the interpretation of this data that this intercooler, because it's so darn thick, has a harder time taking that heat and putting it to the atmosphere. Now, that could be because of my fan, right? But that fan was the same on both intercoolers. And that being said, in the same testing conditions, the same fans, the same freaking everything, that this thing removed heat, but then held on to it longer. That was also shown in the other pulls when the starting temperature was starting to creep up at the beginning of the pull, where the other intercooler, the starting temperature was lower again. So this thing took heat out and held on to it, had a harder time getting into atmosphere, which is exactly what you'd expect with a bar and plate. Now, as far as the bar and plate skill that I've tested, this one seems to be the best at it, at stability during the pulls. I think maybe the Killer Bee might be better at getting rid of the heat after it absorbed it, but it wasn't as good as absorbing as much because it had higher temperatures in the end. It also had a bigger drop in boost pressure. I noticed that the Killer Bee had a different amount of boost. So I'm going to look at the wastegate duties on these as well and see what the wastegate duty tells me as far as how hard the ECU is trying to maintain the boost target from the factory to the Cobb. So I'm going to go to the previous runs, not the 3 back-to-backs. I want to do just the previous single pull. Let's go back to my logging folder, and then I'm going to look at those really quick and just take a quick look and see how well it was doing. I'll show you guys in a second once I get to the folder. I can't remember where the heck I store those at. Oh yeah, here it is. All right, so all right, so 442 was the last pull on the factory intercooler. I'm gonna open that one up, and then I'm gonna open up the second to last one on the Cobb, because I want to, wait, my computer says, oh, it's not open, okay, that's why. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, here we go. Stop it. All right, open these two up, okay. So, let's go over here. I didn't import my logging software for this. I didn't auto-exec it, which I should have. Megalog viewer, right? This is not that. All right, so let's pick an RPM point. That's gonna be the same on both of them. We're gonna do 4,500 RPM. That's middle of the pole. That's where the system is relatively responsive. So I'm gonna highlight 4,500, which is right here. And then I'm gonna say I got 29% and 20 PSI, okay? So we got the other one. We're gonna go to 4,500. 19 psi and 27.8%. That is a negligible change. 1.2%, and about a pound difference. Now, that being said, if you look at these numbers here, 19.3, 19.0, 92, 18.9, 19.3, 19, the map sensor on the FA flutters a lot. So let's just take an average. Let's look around there. Average looks like solid 19 psi, 19.2 even on there. And let's go back to the other one again. Whoopsie. Whoopsie. This one again. This one, the same. That 20 looks like a spike. Look here. 19.2, 19, 19, 19.2 all the way down, really. And a couple 20 spikes. I happened to grab the 20. So we're going to say boost pressure was the same. Duty cycle was 29 to 27.2. That's within 1.2%. I would say that is a negligible difference. And so for that reason, I would say that the Cobb intercooler, due to its size, due to the cross-sectional area of it being so great, that even though it's a bar and plate and has typically have a higher restriction per unit of surface area, but because it has so much surface area over the stock one, that it is a negligible change in air restriction there. So all right, any other questions that you think I should answer, or are the data that I need to look at that I may have missed? What do you guys think? Let me go back to these comments here. Go back some. I said that. Trend service temp. I gave my opinion on that. Again, that's my opinion, and you feel free to make your own decisions. The sprayer is not a gimmick. No, I don't think it is. I mean, we can see that the service temp definitely matters. What design do you like for intercoolers? I'm definitely a tube and fin guy, but you just got to have a big enough one that you can handle the heat load and have enough airflow to it. And with the top mount scoop, airflow isn't the greatest. You know, it isn't the most airflow that you're going to get. It's better to have it in front. But then we're going front mount again, and we're adding more volume to the system. You know, there's just so many, you know, compromises in the whole thing. Personally, in my car, I am taking off my bar and plate and I'm putting on a tube and fin. And then I'm going to see how that goes. But I'm also making an air-water intercooler where I can use a tube and fin heat exchanger that's really thin and has a lot of area, and I can put it in front of the condenser and the radiator and not worry that it's going to impede airflow to those nearly as much as a bar and plate intercooler would. The bar and plate just destroys airflow to those things. The tube and fin, especially a thin one like an air-water heat exchanger would be, if it was a tube and fin one, right? That's the key. A lot of the aftermarket ones is bar and plate, because bar and plate's easier and cheaper to make. So a good tube and fin core in front of that thing, and I wouldn't be too stressed about the airflow impediment to my radiator. So that's the two things I'm working on, and none of them I'm working on a bar and plate. I'm just not a fan of bar and plate. Plus, there's tons of options on the market already. Like, you know, why would I want to get in that market? You know, I want to do one that's unique, something that I feel is correct. I definitely want to do that. Yeah. So, anyways, let's see what else we got. Tube and fin ways for the wind. Oh, our stuff are going to react the same way as top mount. Our front mount's going to react the same way as top mounts. Well, react, yes. It's always going to be the same in that regard as far as the characteristics are concerned, but the front mount has so much mass and so much surface area there over what a top mount has that you're probably not going to see any detriment at all to intake air temps. You may, but you're not likely to see any detriment to intake air temps if it's a big enough front mount. But what you're going to see is the things I talked about before, the detriment to the airflow to the radiator and potentially the AC. Especially on cars that have poor airflow to the front of them, the GC and then the GC throwback being the VA, I think it's a GC throwback. If you look at the VA, I think it totally looks like a modernized GC front end, complete with the shape of the fog light holes in the bumper, the longer, skinnier headlights, the grille shape and everything. It's definitely like a GC kind of throwback to it. Both of those cars have shit airflow to the front of them. The GR and the GD have way better airflow through them. In my car, I immediately saw cool. I actually developed cooling issues going to a front mount on my car because it was such bad airflow through it. And so I had to change a bunch of little things to help increase the airflow to the car, using a better lower tray that created a lower pressure region at the back of the engine so that it would help push air through the car, blocking the upper vents that were technically in a high pressure region that would pressurize the engine bay and make it harder to get airflow through the radiator rails on the highway, blocking the hood scoop because I wasn't using it, things like that. I sealed the radiator to the radiator support and all that crap. I had to do all that stuff just to get my car not to have cooling issues. The beanie tune, right? I like the beanie. I'm a fan. TGV housings, are they worth anything? They're worth whatever you pay for them. There is a restriction. You get TGVs, you do reduce the restriction. At TIC, Turning Concepts was the first ones to make a TGV delete for the FA. They were the very first ones, and we were the first ones to test it when I was there as well. And we took a stock car, untuned, everything. We literally did 3 runs on the dyno, did the TGV delete right there on the dyno, and then 20 minutes later, we did 3 more runs, and the car picked up like 11 or 15 horse or something like that. It absolutely increased power on the car. Now, full effort to full effort, would it do it? I don't know the answer to that. I haven't had a car that's making, 300 wheel and then do them on and off, and see how it does. I believe that it would still help. The issue with that, however, is that without the TGV deletes, or without the TGVs, you then run into other issues with swirl. I'm sorry, I think it's tumble actually in this case. It's tumble in the cylinder, and the car doesn't run quite as good. But I mean, it's so negligible. Most people don't understand or don't even pick it up. I'm glad you liked it, Bradley. We got a spear coat intercooler, right? Yeah, no thanks. Tube and fin, and also thin. Yes, thin is important. Travis knows. He had cooling issues on his car for a little while, and then we corrected that. Average Farms remembers, yeah. We'll call them, Dick. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so again, my consensus is that for a street-driven car, this intercooler is gonna be great. If you drive on the street, then I think it's gonna provide very stable intake temps. It may be high, maybe higher, but it's gonna be more stable. Maybe lower, it's gonna be more stable. Depends on the conditions that led up to before you gave it that pull. So I think for a street car, you're in good shape with this. I think adjust IET timing compensations if you move the IET to the, whoops, I lost it. It faded before I could finish reading it. How might you adjust IET compensations if you move the IET to the top mount or the front mount cold pipe? But still math though. Well, don't really. The factory compensations, well, I like to use the GM ones. Let me back that up. GM models their intake air temp timing compensations based on the knock characteristics of gasoline as the temperature increases. There are studies, I wish I could link you one right now, but I can't because I'm sitting in the car, but they show how the, I'm gonna turn this car off. So they show how much gasoline how much more likely gasoline is to detonate as intake air temp increases. Man, I have a hard time with words right now. I'm trying to read comments and answer at the same time. It's not a good plan. So the Subaru one is pretty close, but the Subaru one is slightly changed because it is in the math. I like to do something more like what GM does, and then put the intake air temp in the cold pipe right before the throttle body. That gives you the protection that you would need in the event that your air temperature does actually go up. But since it's a front mount, usually the temperature doesn't go up that much. So I would use a GM style compensation where they have it for the highest load, because Subaru only has a flat compensation, it doesn't have it load based. Well, that's not true. Sometimes they have the newer cars have a table that applies a percentage of your intake air temp compensation based on load and RPM. The older cars is just a flat, the temperature is this, the compensation is that. So in the event that you have the ability to tune the intake air temp compensation based on load and RPM, I would set the main table for just air temp and timing to like how GM does it, and then I would use the compensation table, which is a percentage of that timing compensation, to pull some of that out as load went down, because you don't want to affect idle, because your timing is not changing dramatically idle, so there's no reason for your intake air temp to affect idle timing. That just results in weird changes in engine torque at idle, which then creates weird idle behaviors, and you don't want that crap. So yeah, I would use the GM compensations essentially. Hope that answers your question. What are your thoughts on turbo blankets for top mounts? Going back and forth with upgrading top mount versus getting front mount. I don't think it's needed. I think that the regular heat shield is adequate. Obviously, a blanket will reduce the underhood temps a little bit. I don't like blankets though, because blankets increase coking of the oil in the turbo, which decreases turbo life, and also can potentially cause issues with the turbine housing and cracking if it's under stress, because if you have an exhaust on it or whatever, and then the sheer amount of heat that is retained in the housing due to the blanket and stuff. So I don't like blankets. I don't like running them. I don't like running. I only use a blanket if it's needed to keep the stuff around it cold, and the potential failure of the stuff around it is a greater chance or burden or more expensive or more important than the turbo itself. Otherwise, I don't run one. I just use standard heat shields. I have a heat shield that I made for my car, which has, it's not a turbo blanket, it's what they use in ovens, right? It's the oven foam stuff, the cottony oven fill, and I sandwiched that between 2 layers of aluminum, and I made that still a heat shield though, so it's not touching the turbo, but I did that to make that heat shield more effective, to help stop radiant heat, and add more layers in between the rest of the engine made that. But it's not touching the turbo. The turbo can still, get, as the air flows through the engine bay, can still pull heat off the turbo instead of just soaking it around the turbo the whole time, and the airflow does nothing for it. Also, when the turbo cools off or when you shut it down, the coolant in the Subaru flows to the turbo and helps cool it off after you shut it down. That time is lengthened and the effect is reduced if you have a blanket on there. So, anything else? That's it. Okay. That's my wife calling me again, so I better answer that. I'm late for the dinner for Chase's birthday, so I need to go. But I hope that answered you guys' questions. Hope that provided you some data that you like, and I will see you guys later.